Joining us right now, Democratic Senator from Delaware, Chris Coons. He sits on basically every relevant committee when it comes to what we're talking about. Foreign relations, judiciary, approach, all of them. Let's start here, though, Senator, because you have the president saying that. And then you also have President Zelensky this morning saying this. Let me play this for you.
Unfortunately, President Trump, I have great respect for him as a leader of a nation that we have great respect for. The American people who always support us, unfortunately, lives in this disinformation space.
Zelensky saying that Donald Trump lives in this disinformation space. I mean, no matter the frustration here, do you think it's smart for Zelensky in this moment to be challenging Trump so publicly?
Look, President Zelensky has shown he has real courage. 3 years ago, Putin began this war of aggression by sending hundreds of thousands of Russian troops into Ukraine. They've committed atrocities. They've conquered roughly 20% of the country. And instead of rolling over Zelensky and Kyiv in the first few days, as Putin expected and intended, they have fought fiercely. And for every step of the way, the United States and our European allies and partners have been there with them. In fact, the Europeans have contributed more than we have in military support, economic support, humanitarian support. And so I think it's appropriate for President Zelensky, whose people have fought so hard and so many of whom have died for their freedom, to be at the table alongside our European partners and allies as we negotiate a potential peace deal. It's pretty easy, Kate, to imagine what that deal would look like. It would require President Trump to simply show that he knows what peace through strength means, because we do have the upper hand here. Strengthening sanctions against Russia, strengthening our military support for Ukraine, standing arm in arm with Ukraine and Europe, we could force an end to this war on terms that are good for Ukraine. Instead, President Trump seems poised to betray Ukraine and abandon Europe. That would make him the biggest loser of the 21st century. He would be picking the team that includes Iran, North Korea, China, and Russia over the team that is Ukraine and our trusted and loyal allies of 75 years, France, Germany, the UK, Italy, who've served and fought alongside us. This would be a tragic error of immense proportions.
Do you think, with that, do you think Ukraine is going to get a good deal in the end? Do you think Ukraine is going to win this war in the end when these negotiations are finished?
Look, the only way for Putin to lose would be for him to have NATO expand. That's already happened. There's 2 new NATO members. For him to pay an enormous economic and human cost for this war. That's already happening. And to prevent him from restarting this war in a few short months or years. That's the key point. If Trump drives a tough bargain here and secures the future for Ukraine, he can still win this for Ukraine. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll recover all of their sovereign territory in the short term, but sidelining Putin, keeping him a pariah, not letting him claim victory on the ground or on TV is a key piece of this. And whether or not that happens is in the hands of a small group of Republican senators who were with me at Munich and who say they will stand by Ukraine. We'll see what they do this week.
When you say making sure that Vladimir Putin remains a pariah, we also heard Zelensky say that what Donald Trump is doing is bringing him back out of isolation. Donald Trump is, I think we can guarantee one thing, is he is not going to say Vladimir Putin is a pariah.
That's correct. And that's why it is so alarming, the direction that Trump is already taking. By reaching out to Putin directly, by having private negotiations with him, by sitting down, having his national security advisor and special envoy and Secretary of State sit across the table in Saudi Arabia with Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, without Ukraine, without Europe. These are alarming initial steps. He's also tried to force on Ukraine an extractive minerals deal. And so Zelensky so far is standing firm. I think there's a real chance that both the Ukrainians and Russians keep fighting while there is a lot of talk. But the initial moves that President Trump is making suggest that he doesn't want peace through strength. He wants chaos through weakness by welcoming Putin back onto the world stage.
Another move that the president is making is through another executive order that happened overnight, a sweeping executive order I want to ask you about, which is essentially trying to pull under White House control agencies that were created by Congress decades ago to be separate and independent of any president. The SEC, the FCC, the FTC, all looking at, these are those agencies that work towards consumer protections and regulation. What is this going to do?
Well, this was an issue I focused on in Justice Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings. The unitary executive, a theory that Justice Kavanaugh and other conservatives had advanced for years, which suggests that the president should be much more powerful than I think the framers ever intended. If the Supreme Court overturns a decades-old precedent called Humphrey's executor, it would hand President Trump even more power to shut down federal agencies, to lay off thousands of people, to direct their regulatory actions in ways that have not been part of our government for decades, and I think would be a dangerous abdication of the Supreme Court's responsibility to keep in place some of the core guardrails of our modern democracy.
Senator Chris Coons. Senator, thank you for coming in.